Welcome to this interview with PeterAnthony Togni. This is with Cypress Publishing series for church choirs called Songs for the Sanctuary. Welcome, PeterAnthony. It is so great to see you this morning and to get to hear a little bit about you and your piece of Prayer of St. Francis that is published through Cypress.
Well, it's lovely to be here and great to meet you too, Joy.
Just would love to hear about your history as a composer or your journey and some of the main highlights of that.
It's complicated. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I was born into a musical family. My father, Victor Togni, was an organist and composer and improviser, and he was ended up at the at St. Michael's Cathedral in Toronto. Did a lot of concerts for the CBC. He studied with Nadia Boulanger, Messiaen. They were friends, and But the sad thing is he was killed in a car crash when he was 30. He was on the way to play a concert in Montreal, and anyway, so this is to say that I heard organ music from the time I was this big, and my dad used to sometimes apparently took me when he was practicing and put me on top of the organ. So that if I'm slightly crazy, that's probably why. We were in Toronto at that time, and then ended up going to England for a little bit, and then came back to Canada when I was 13. And I hadn't really, I got really serious about music when I was 15. We were living at that time. My stepfather was English and loved to be kind of an exploring mind and person. So we ended up in northern BC, in Fort St. John, and that's important so much because I had a wonderful piano teacher there. That without her I wouldn't be in music, because a lot of teachers didn't know what to do with me, because I never wanted to play what was on the page. I wanted to write my own stuff, and I was always improvising and stuff. So this teacher, her name was Joan Churchill, and she was so encouraging to be creative, and was such a sweetheart. And we'd have 5-hour lessons. I'd go over there, and we would just drink coffee, and I fell in love with her. I think she was 60 at the time and I was 15, but I mean she was just so wonderful. Anyway, from there, I ended up studying organ and composition at UBC. I was just there for 2 years, and then I went to Paris. I studied with the great Jean Langlais, composer and organist improviser, who was at the Church of Saint Clotilde, where Franck was. So I was in Paris for 2 years, studied organ and improvisation with Langlais and composition, the Schola Cantorum. And studying improv, I learned mostly composition from learning how to improvise and listening to him improvise, how to, take a small idea and develop it. The big part of music for me has also been jazz. I started to play jazz when I was in my teens, and always loved the music of Bill Evans, the great jazz pianist Bill Evans. And so that has always been a part of my life. I had a trio called Peter Togni Trio, and we did jazz, but we did a lot of classical music like Bach and Handel in the jazz style, that sort of thing. And so the other thing is the CBC has been a big part of my life. I went into broadcasting from Calgary. I lived in Calgary for 8 years, and that's where I did my first radio show from there, and got into it quite by accident. The producer was recording me for an organ concert. He said, I like the sound of your voice. We're looking for a new host for a classical show. You want to try? I said, okay. And I never thought I'd get into it. He even said to me, I don't think you'll make it really, but we'll try, because they actually wanted a lady for the show, because it had been a man before with this deep, one of the great CBC voices, and mine wasn't one of those. That was a lot higher, and but somehow, anyway, so I ended up going to Toronto to host Stereo Morning, and then ended up in Halifax, which has been wonderful. And all the while, I was always doing music, and I thought, I, the morning show nearly killed me because I play jazz sometimes until 3 a.m. Get up and do the show, and but it was always there, and I thought, geez, I've got to get back to doing more music. So then I came to Halifax, and I did the show called Weekender, and then that became Choral Concert, which I took over from the great Howard Dick, right? And then things were sort of changing, I could see, and then I just thought it's time to go, So that was back in 2014, I think, and I'm pretty much writing music full time now.
So tell me a little bit, how did this piece come about in the midst of all of those drawings of your own too?
Well, this was fun. This is what I was living in Toronto at the time. We moved to Halifax in 1998. And this was, I think this was 95. And it was Leonard Enns, a wonderful conductor and composer. He commissioned me to write this piece, and I think he said choose a favorite text, or that was the text he wanted me to do, because I just moved to Halifax when the piece came out.
Okay.
And so I'm so glad you've chosen this. I mean, what do they say? Simplicity is key, right? I mean,
that's right.
This piece is very different. Like a lot of my other music, if somebody listened to Lamentations, they wouldn't think that I was the same composer that wrote this one, But I would say this is a very important piece for me for so many reasons. It's from the jazz world in some ways, right? And a lot of the chords in that piece are chords that I would use in other pieces that are influenced for me by listening to the great Bill Evans, and the jazz pianist Bill Evans. If you listen to him, his harmonies were everything. They were like Debussy and Ravel, but it was jazz. That's what Miles Davis liked about him, right? Yes. And the cool thing about Bill Evans is that his music was influenced by Russian Orthodox church music because his mother was Orthodox. Oh. And so that music connected with me when I was very young. And I thought, and now I look back and I go, oh yeah, man, I know why,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
I see some very interesting writing here, and I'm sure it is very different than your other writing. This text seems to focus in on what I can do, and then followed by how I feel or how I can be, and then followed by what can happen, what will happen to me, or what will be coming to me.
That's brilliant. Yeah. And so, and just to say also that St. Francis has been very important to me for a long time. I think he's one of the few that got it right. He took, he didn't stay in a monastery. He took the faith out into the streets.
Sure.
He really did. And he kind of brought simplicity into glory, that's the thing. And that's a little bit sort of the DNA of this piece, is simplicity. Yes. that's brought into light,
Yes.
And it's interesting because St. Francis never was a priest. He asked us to stay a brother this whole time. And he had such a wonderful simplicity and yet depth. I mean, even right before he died, he asked if he could have some of the cookies that Clare, who became Saint Clare, made these wonderful cookies, which he really liked. So, and then someone was talking to him and said, well, how long do you think we'll keep sinning in life? Like just before we die? He said, no, you're going to be sinning until about 3 seconds before you die. You're human. So getting back to the piece, I wanted it to be something that if you wanted to, you could just read the score and play it as is, right? You could play it with piano only. You could play it with organ if you like, whether it's more piano. But they put the chords in. the chord, which so if you're a guitarist, if you want to do this with a guitar and bass and drums, you could, because the chords are all there also, right?
Yeah.
So, and the other thing about it is it has a bit of a Celtic influence, because we just moved to Halifax, right? And I was hearing a lot of that music, and not trying to make it Celtic in quotation marks, but a little bit of the feel of that is in this piece also.
Sure,
Yeah.
that makes sense. There's a wonderful moment, measure 33. I don't know if you
I've got it.
But it is the one where you've been singing, where there's hatred, let me so love, and you come to where there is despair, hope. It feels as if it goes into 3/4 instead of 6/8 to me. Is that what you were thinking there too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Despair.
Just for that moment.
In a way, you're still feeling the 6/8 underneath, but like we're giving some space around hope. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. To highlight the word hope. Yeah. Those wonderful little gems in here, just these little moments, and I love how they can bring out that text.
Thank you. And then another important one is when you get to bar 45. It's kind of where the essence of Francis is really there, right?
The consoled section.
When it goes in, to be consoled, as to console, to be understood, as to understand, right? So Francis was always talking about not wanting to be loved, if you can imagine, right? There's a whole litany of that he wrote, and one of the things and it's a hard one, because who doesn't want to be loved?
Right.
But Francis talked about, no, you don't ask to be loved. You give absolutely everything, right?
Yeah, okay.
And maybe love will come. And of course, God loves us infinitely and always.
Yes.
But that's so a little bit of that kind of, just absolutely giving everything away. And then and the chords sort of like when you get to the C sus over B flat, right? And then where's that going? Then it goes to the A, F over A, and it's still not quite resolved, not until over the page. And then, it is in giving that we receive. That's really the center of the piece, right?
Sure.
In many ways, which I just made unison.
Exactly. Which also comes down to the simplicity of Francis' words and thoughts, and
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because it seems so simple and sweet and all the rest of it, but actually inside it's not simple at all.
Well, what a gift this piece is to our community,
well, thank you so much.
The choral world, and so thank you so much for writing it in the first place.
Thank you, Joy.
I'm delighted that Cypress is able to publish this and that
I'm
it's
so thrilled
accessible.
about that.
Yeah.
That's a great, so that's, tell me, that little series is quite something. Are you really getting this music out into churches? And
so pieces like this, which are accessible enough for our regular experience of singers, but that have the interest. And it's really interesting with this one, that jazz influence as well as the Orthodox influence, twinned with or tripled with all of these words that are so magnificent. So thank you so much, PeterAnthony Togni, for this piece, for this interview, and we look forward to many other things coming from you. So you can find this piece on the series of Songs for the Sanctuary with Cypress Publishing. And thank you again, PeterAnthony Togni, for the Prayer of St. Francis.